to invite Seaton up to read a scripture verse for us.
Revelation 21, 1 through 4, the New Living Translation, the New Jerusalem. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them, their God. He will wipe away," I added that away. "He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. And all these things are gone forever."
I believe Josh.
My name is Josh Anderson, and I've had the pleasure and the honor of knowing the Telesha family for over 20 years. I was speaking with Roxanne this week, and she was reminding me that out and about in public, she and Tony would always refer to me as their adopted grandson, and so I am honored to be able to be reading Romans 8:31 through 39, and it's about love. What shall we say about such wonderful things as these? If God is for us, then who can ever be against us? Since he did not spare even his own son, but gave him up for all of us, won't he also give everything else? Who dares accuse whom God has chosen for his own? No one. For God himself has given us right standing with himself. Who then will condemn us? No one, for Christ Jesus died for us and was raised to life with us, and he is sitting in the place of honor at God's right hand, pleading for us. Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have done trouble or calamity, or are persecuted or hungry or destitute or in danger or threatened with death? As the scripture says, "For your sake we are killed every day. We are being slaughtered like sheep." No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. And I am convinced that nothing can separate us from God's love. Neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither our fears for today nor worries about tomorrow. For even the powers of hell can separate us from the love of God. No power in the sky above or in the earth below. Indeed, nothing in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus our Lord.
Hi everyone, my name is Amory and I am Tony's oldest daughter. He would always introduce me to everybody and say, "This is my baby girl," because I was a little bit taller than he was. There was always a joke with my dad. Anybody who knew him, there was never a serious moment when you were out having fun. My dad was the original Google. If I ever had any question or any of my kids about anything, who are we gonna call? Grandpa. Because my dad knew everything about everything. He even admitted to me that as a child, he read a whole set of encyclopedias, and he also read the whole dictionary. And at breakfast, we would frequently have the word of the day when he was home for breakfast. I mean, my dad was very much ahead of his times. Now you can get that on your phone. During a recent phone call a few weeks back, my dad and I were talking, and he was reminiscing about how when we lived at Knollcrest Drive in Brookfield, that he had made in the early 70s this really scary, I don't even know if it was reel to reel or something, like haunted house thing with his voice and howling. And some of the parents in the neighborhood, he told me, I never knew this, had complained to him that it was a little too scary for some of their children to go. Yeah, and he still did it every year anyways. He knew everything about computers and smartphones and new technology. He even installed an 8-track cassette player in my mom's VW bus in the early 70s. He was always ahead of the times. He bought down coats and pants kits and sat in the basement he had refinished, and he sewed all of us kids down coats and pants. Mine was bright red, and you can imagine what everybody at Wisconsin Elementary School said to me at the time, but guess what? My dad taught me not to care what other people thought, and I loved that down coat and pants that my dad made for me. I just have to say that I'm recognizing now that I am reading my personal memories of my dad before his eulogy, so I'm just gonna go along with the continuity. I apologize. I have so many fun memories with my dad as a child. One of the coolest things he ever did was bring me and some of my siblings bike riding on the new highway that was built in Hawthorne before it opened. So can you imagine being under 10 years old and getting on a bike with your dad and driving down a 4-lane brand new highway with no cars on it? It's still one of the top 10 memories of my life. It was so cool. He always thought outside the box. And then for my birthday, which is in the fall, he hid coins and bouncy balls in a leaf pile for grade school birthday party for me. And back in the 60s, nobody was doing that. I remember my friends just thinking it was the best thing to dig through that pile of leaves and get those coins and bouncy balls. Unfortunately, he did not look up the movie too well, so he brought us to a movie called The Paper Lion, which was about a football player with a bunch of girls. But it was still okay because my dad had planned that party and done it for me, and it was fine. He made teepees for all of us kids and taught us how to make snow forts. There were lots of snowball fights and the much dreaded rubber band wars. Ouch. I remember my dad helping us when we lived in New York, decorate our bicycles for parades, and then seeing my dad sitting in a Cadillac convertible and waving as the president of the Rotary Club. I was a tomboy growing up, and I spent time with my dad and his brother, my Uncle George, and my older brother Dwayne, fishing and target shooting. My dad started calling me Ammo instead of Amory because I was such a good target shooter with my BB gun, and the nickname stuck. The last time I talked to him, he still called me Ammo, and it made me feel so special. I loved attending chiropractic seminars with my parents in Boston as a child. My dad took just me, which was so special, with so many children, and my dad being a busy doctor and all his hobbies and interests that he had. And so he brought me, and I still have this I don't know, maybe I was about 10 years old, but my daddy brought me to the USS Constitution to see a military ship in the Boston Harbor. And I had absolutely no interest in going there. But guess what? It was one of the best memories because my dad brought me and made that special time for me. I worked at his offices for many years. I remember my dad needing me to be his receptionist at his Greenwich office one day. And when there was a break in patients, he gave me money to go buy myself a pair of black patent leather Mary Janes. And I still remember what fun that was. When I was working at his Danbury office as a teen, he would give me money to go to the restaurant next door and get taco burgers and pina colada shakes for dinner for us. He would pick me up from my house when I was first married and bring me to the diner before work. I cherished all the time we spent together. He was truly a healer, and he was in his element. Caring for and talking with his patients. I remember sometimes getting so frustrated, there'd be all 3 rooms were filled, the waiting room was filled, someone was having a hard day, and I'd be knocking on the door, trying to get my dad to come out, because there was all these patients waiting, but if somebody needed him, he would stay in that room with them. My friend Beth from high school called me yesterday and told me for the first time that my dad was instrumental in her emotional healing journal because of the advice that he gave her when she was his patient. My dad loved the outdoors. He took us camping, hiking, and canoeing, and I inherited his love of the outdoors from him. Point Folly, Mount Tom, Macedonia, Hammonasset State Park are still places that I frequent. Sleeping in a tent is one of my happiest places to be. And he flew kites with us at Hammonasset when the wind would whip up. Although my dad was stern and strict, he was a child at heart. He would make spitballs at fancy restaurants and blow them through a straw at us kids. And much to my mother's horror, the spitball wars had begun. I asked my dad how he had lost so much weight during COVID, and he replied, "The hometown buffet went out of business." He was always joking around. And my dad and I started a volleyball night at the church that we both used to attend together. There was a gym. We both loved playing volleyball. So we started a volleyball fellowship, and people in the church and that didn't go to church would come in and play. And I have so many great memories of playing volleyball with my dad. I've noticed that most people tend to become crabby or a little bitter as they age. My dad mellowed in his later years. He was like a fine wine, and he truly got better with age. It wasn't easy living with him as a child because his expectations were so high for himself and for us. He had character flaws like we all do, but he was working on them with God's help. On the family group text that we had started when my mom got her pancreatic cancer, he frequently texted, "Good night, everybody. We love you all. Love Mom and Dad." His later years were all just about letting us all know how much he loved us. Dad, I will see you later. I hope that your reunion with Dwayne and Mandy and your family of origin was divine. Thanks for loving me. Love of Ammo. I should have read that last. Thank you. So I'm going to read his eulogy that all the siblings had, and my mom had input in. Dr. Anthony Joseph Telesha, D.C., died suddenly on March 23, 2022. He was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania on 5/25/1937 to a coal miner, George, and a seamstress, Mary. My dad only spoke Lithuanian until he was 8, and later on he only remembered the naughty words. My dad had one sibling, his youngest brother, George, who passed away last year. Tony excelled academically, graduating from the Bronx School of Science at 16 and then attending City College for mechanical engineering and pre-med. He began working as a mechanical engineer at the age of 20 in New York City. Tony met his future wife, Roxanne, at a dance held at Mount St. Vincent in Manhattan. They were married on Easter Sunday, April 17, 1960. Dad swears that when he saw Mom, he told his friend, and he said the story multiple times, that he had just seen the woman he was going to marry. Years later, that friend says that was exactly right. Through years of good and bad, love was what saved their marriage and kept them together through thick and thin. My mom's wonderful caretaker, Linda, was at the house, and she shared with me that she would walk into their apartment and she would find my mom and dad in their recliners, holding hands, fast asleep. And it was such a blessing to me to see my parents' relationship healed and restored after all of the losses and heartaches they had endured. Thank you for that gift. His plan was to be a surgeon, but he was so compassionate that he was never able to handle blood or think that he hurt any of his patients. Us children like to kid and say, if Dad was an engineer with his brilliant mind, we all would be millionaires. But his calling was to help his patients, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. And my brother Mark would not be with us today if my dad did not become a doctor. My brother stopped breathing when he was a toddler, when my dad was at home from spinal meningitis. And my dad in the early 70s knew how to perform CPR. And he was able to get my brother breathing again. And I remember him holding my little brother Mark, and saying, please God, save my son. I don't want to lose my son. He knew, even then, when he was not living his surrendered life, he knew who had the power. Mom and Dad both attended chiropractic college in Palmer. They welcomed their oldest son, Dwayne, and then their oldest daughter, Amory, while finishing their Doctor of Chiropractic degrees. My dad worked loading trucks at night to support his growing family. Mom would write out index cards with terms he needed to study so he could study while he worked. Many a story was shared about how he took us off working with an unheated warehouse. And he actually did have permanent frostbite from that job. He later moved his family to Hawthorne, New York, and started his first practice. They welcomed their Irish twin daughters, Seton and Andrea, and then their whoopsie number one, Mark. In 1971, my dad moved us to Brookfield, Connecticut, so he could have his family live away from the city. And I'll tell you, me and my two sisters were in the backseat bawling. Why did you move us with the cows, Dad? I know I really enjoyed living so close to the city. But my parents still brought us pretty much every Sunday. He eventually had 3 offices in Connecticut and New York. He would drive 45 minutes to his New York office and swore he could drive the Sawmill Parkway with his eyes closed. I can say that that is true because I had to drive with him to be a receptionist there. And one of my dad's favorite sayings when I'd be like, "You're gonna run off the road," or "watch for that," is, "That's why you're in the car, to keep me from getting into accidents." In 1980, I didn't finish saying. When driving with Mark, he would turn each ride into something funny. Mostly, he would be the race car announcer. I didn't get to see that, Mark. In 1980, this is going to be hard. A great tragedy struck our family, and our oldest brother, Dwayne, died, his oldest son. Dwayne had spoken with my mom and stated that while hitchhiking, the woman had led him to Jesus just a few days before he died. 3 days after his death, Dad went to a full gospel business meeting and Mom went to a Woman's Glow Bible study, and they both rededicated their lives to the Lord Jesus Christ. They had not talked that day till when they laid down to go to sleep, and they realized they both made the same decision to follow Jesus. In 1981, they welcomed whoopsie number 2. The 6th child, Amanda Joy, and my dad named her. My mom was pregnant already when Dwayne had passed away, and Amanda Joy was such a gift to all of us. Sadly, tragedy struck our family again when my sweet sister Mandy, at the tender age of 14, was diagnosed with a rare brain cancer. She went to be with the Lord at 15. Still, Mom and Dad stayed faithful to Jesus. In 1984, they started a Christian school during a meeting in their living room, and it is now called Faith Preparatory School, located in New Milford, Connecticut. And I had the honor of teaching there too. My dad served in the Air Force Reserve and was the president of the Rotary Club in Hawthorne, New York. He loved all museums and shared his excitement for learning with anyone that would listen, and even shared with those who didn't care to hear. And I have to add on to that whenever we went to battle reenactments or Sturbridge Village, my dad would be there questioning the blacksmith for at least 90 minutes. And he would remember everything the blacksmith told him, so then he could later tell all of us. Fishing, hunting, canoeing, and hiking were things he enjoyed. He shared his love of the outdoors with all of us. He was a ham radio enthusiast. His handle was N1FIH. Dad said it stood for number 1 fine intelligent ham. Yes, and I cannot tell my mother's interpretation, yes. He had many interests and hobbies and belonged to many clubs. Some of them shared with us, like the Rockets. That was a great time. Dad loved learning so much that he just never had time to do all the things he was interested in. Unfortunately, I inherited that. So he would try, and he would tell you about it also. He always had a joke to share, and sometimes you heard it 100 times before, or you waited with breath held to make sure he stayed PC. My dad did not know that existed. He also loved goofing off. He was kicked out of at least 3 McDonald's due to him having a spitball fight with his son Mark, and Mark wasn't even fighting back. One time he missed, and this spitball, one time, I'm sure it was more than once, this spitball landed in some person's food. We just wanted to crawl under the table. Dad loved people and spoke with everyone, no matter what their status in life, and enjoyed brightening their day. If their native tongue was not English, he would use it as a learning opportunity to learn from them. Being a technology guru, he enjoyed his PC immensely. He bought his first home computer in 1976. This actually had a huge impact on all of us kids. He knew it was the future, and he also knew it would give us kids a head start. He loved reading and was a lifelong learner. He was known to read the complete works of Shakespeare, the whole Sherlock Holmes series in one day. You would be hard-pressed to find Dad without a book. He also loved reading mysteries by reading the last chapter first. That I still don't get. Dad prayed every night by name for everyone in the family, friends, and those in need. He would always pray for the person in any ambulance that he would see and to give the doctors wisdom. I inherited that also. Tony was grandpa to Amory and Greg's children, Victoria, Timothy, Teresa, Tyler, and Nia. Seton and Jay's children, Andrew, Megan, and Emily. Andrea and Joe's girls, Samantha and Alyssa. Mark and Susie's children, Xavier, Jaden, Zakai, Maggie, and Soren. And he was Uncle Wolf Wolf to his brother George's sons, George and Adam. Thank you so much for allowing me just to share a little bit about my dad and all the amazing things that he did. And the biggest lesson that I take away from my dad is that you're never too old to ask God to help you to become the best you that you can be.
At this point, we would like to open the microphone up here to immediate family. I'm looking at the first 2 rows. If there's something you'd like to share, yes.
Hi again, Seton here. Thank you everyone who's here today in person and virtually, if that's working. That means my dad touched your life somehow, either directly or indirectly through one of his family members. While my dad was not perfect, I believe no human can be, but he was a perfect dad for me. God blessed me with a smart, kind, compassionate, caring, loving, funny dad. We have so many wonderful memories of our dad. Some revolve around him bringing my siblings and me to the perfect sledding hill at Hawthorne Elementary School. Who knows how many times he pulled our wooden sleds back up the hill, most likely holding his Andrea, who we called adorable. We still did last week. Because she still is adorable, that's right. He built the best igloo one time in our yard, and when my big brother, Dwayne, and the neighborhood boys had had enough of his 3 little sisters, our dad made another igloo for Amory, Andrea, and me. It was not as big, though. That's because all the boys were playing instead of working. Invariably, our mom would have a gigantic pot of hot chocolate ready for us when we went inside. I was always last one out, first one in. Didn't like the cold. He made model rockets with us kids, and I remember launching them in a field with my dad's only sibling, our Unky George, 11 years his junior, who lived with us when we were young until he married our Aunt Jean. Our dad loved their sons, George and Adam. Our dad brought us kids bike riding, as Amory mentioned, on the freshly paved Hawthorne Circle before it was open to traffic. We had honey bee hives in our yard, and when we moved to Brookfield, brought them with us, and numerous litters of puppies and kittens. And we went fishing, canoeing, camping, and hiking with our mom and or our dad, or both our mom and dad. Amory, Andrea, and I won many Halloween costumes, like at the Hawthorne Halloween Parade contests, because of our parents' imaginative creations, such as the 3 little kittens who lost their mittens, the 3 little pigs, and we used our Great Dane Fritz as the big bad wolf. And recently, I heard we were the 3 men in the tub. I was probably too young to remember that. And then we 3 girls were the Spirit of 76 in 1976, and my dad would frequently talk about how he knew where we were in the neighborhood because Andrea was playing her flute and I was playing the drums and Amory was carrying the flag. And our mom's mother loved our dad like a son, despite his endless mother-in-law jokes. He was quite the jokester. My son one time said to me, "Grandma's grandpa's 3rd wife." I'm like, "No, he isn't. What are you talking about?" And then I remembered this joke that my dad used to tell all the time about his first wife and the poisonous mushroom. I don't know if I ever, I think I told Dad that, I don't know. And then I read so many nice things on Facebook about my dad and how he impacted people's lives. Somebody that works for him years ago shared that she was like, "How come nobody ever shared Jesus with me before?" And then she remembered Dr. Telesha had. And she also remembered how much he loved his wife, and that he said they had such a good marriage because they went out for appetizers on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He went on Tuesdays and she went on Thursdays. And there is no word in the English language to properly describe our dad's level of intelligence and ability to retain new information. And he freely shared this information. If I only had retained more, it would bring me great joy to share with you the color of the thread used to sew the buttons onto soldiers' uniforms in nearly every century, along with why that particular color, how it was dyed, as well as the material used to fabricate the buttons. Dad loved our mom so very much. They referred to the last year and a half that they've been home as their second honeymoon, and their apartment is their honeymoon haven. They were affectionate and loving towards each other in front of us kids. We all know how to say "I love you" in several languages from hearing them use those languages to say "I love you" to each other. And now I'm going to share something I wrote in 2018, and I realized it should be entitled "What I Learned from My Parents," but I called it "Grief and How to Live Your Life." I believe the deeper the love, the deeper the grief. I believe that grief is an ongoing, ever-changing process that reflects the impact the person who died had on your life and how much you remember of your time with them. I believe that talking about your loved one with others helps their life's impact on you learn more about what is truly important in life. I believe that kindness, love, and how you treat other people, those you know and those you don't, regardless of how they treat you, along with your relationship with your God, are at the top of that list. And smiling. Smiling's my favorite. Not where you lived, not what type of car you drove, not how you made a living, not where you went to school, nor what your grades were. Now, if they don't matter to me, they don't matter. What matters to me is how you make others feel when they are around you. Please be kind to everyone, including yourself. Listen, not just to hear. Smile. Help. Take a look around long enough to see that there are other people all around you. How can you brighten their day? Hold open a door. Let them ahead of you in line. Smile. You never know the last time someone smiled at that person, or if they're having a rough day. Be the person that you feel you need to someone else. Make eye contact, make polite conversation with someone in line at the coffee shop or the cashier. Ask the mom or dad in a grocery store with a screaming baby if there is anything you can do to help. Pump the gas for the person in front of or behind you after they pay so they can sit in their warm car. Mail, yes, mail a handwritten thank you letter to someone. This is what I've learned from my parents. They modeled it. They didn't have to tell us these things. And I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mama. I started calling my mom Mama right after she got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope that you were fortunate enough to fondly remember our father when you see an index card, a Swiss Army knife, or handkerchief. He never left home without them or the full armor of God. God bless you all.
Immediate family. Not you. Oh, wait. So the people online can hear you.
I just like to thank him publicly for being a good husband, protecting me. Especially, I didn't realize till he left on Wednesday so suddenly without my permission how much he took care of me. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I just like to publicly acknowledge how blessed I was to have him for my husband. We had our moments, but we had wonderful times as well.
62 years.
62 years.
My name is Megan. I'm one of Seaton's daughters. And as I was reflecting on just the impact that my grandma and grandpa have had on me, I just realized it's not easy to lose a loved one, but I have peace knowing that God has transformed grandpa's life and he served the Lord well, and he gets to rejoice in glory. And back in 2013, I had the opportunity to serve overseas for the first time. And grandma and grandpa were so supportive. They helped find random people who donated in order to even get me there. But they also were so supportive in setting up for me to speak in front of a church for the first time. and I just felt so supported. Everyone prayed for me. They didn't even know me. They met me for the first time. And little did I know that that was only the launching pad for God to unlock my voice and use me for the gospel in so many ways afterwards. And Grandpa and Grandma prayed together and for me and my husband Joshua more than anyone. And they're a really great example for us as they walked through marriage for 62 years. And those years were not without hardship and heartbreak. My grandma tells me that Reinhard Bonnke prayed over their marriage, and they had renewed strength to stay together in a really tough time. And later on, my husband ends up going to the ministry school that Reinhard Bonnke started. And so I see that God is in all of the details. And Grandpa was filled with more knowledge than Wikipedia and Google and everything combined. He texted random reminders of what vitamins to take in different months to make sure you were taking your vitamin D or zinc or whatever it was you needed. He was the founder of the Booger Butt Club for us grandchildren. If you sucked your thumb and twirled your hair at the same time, you were officially in the Booger Butt Club. And Grandma and Grandpa, they had their iPhones before all of us grandkids did. And I just remember at holidays, they were glued to their phones, sitting on their phones. We didn't even know what they were capable of doing. We just knew that they were glued to their phones. And then we shortly followed along. You could always count on Grandpa making inappropriately timed comments. It was impossible to spend time with him without that. And I just remember in my awkward teenage years that he would tell me my posture was so bad that I would need a bra for my shoulder blades in the bag. And so I'm grateful for who Grandpa was, the impact that he had on all of our lives, for the holidays spent at his house and our family gatherings. We will definitely miss him, and we have peace knowing that he's with Jesus in heavenly glory.
A little compelled in my last comment that my dad would want me to say, but I just want to appreciate my dad. My calling for life has not been about money or success, and my dad's always been proud of me, and that means a lot. As a boy, he would talk about him working in the inner city, teaching inner city kids how to shoot .22s, which I don't know what kind of skill that is for in the Bronx back then. But he would split bullets, and he would do it in the basement. We would shoot 22 bullets in the basement or on the side of Route 6 because there was hardly any cars went by. But he would split a 22 and take out 2 candles with 1 bullet. And so he was really good. But he always talked about compassion for kids, and that's something that he instilled in our lives, and especially me. And I've dedicated my life to working with kids. And he always said, Mark, I'm not disappointed in you because you work hard. It isn't a matter of, where you make it in life in terms of money, but in terms of your drive of making an impact in this world. And so that was great and took so much weight off of my shoulders. And I always really appreciate that. But the thing that he also learned is to take tragedy, and they didn't take it and run away from it, but they actually, once they gone through the tragedy, they actually turned it around and would try to help those around, and that's just a great thing. So when we lost Amanda to cancer, our son that we adopted also passed away from cancer, and my parents didn't stay away from it. They ran to it with open arms, and really appreciative of that. I don't know how many people can do that. Now, the compelling part, some people might be offended by this, but my dad, he would always talk about how he would want to die, and he would always like, oh, gee, I hope either I'm sleeping or it's like a blood clot and I just go really quick. And that was really big for him. Like, I think he was talking about that in his 40s. And my mom was walking down the hallway looking at my dad, and he just shrugged over, and she thought he just, was playing a joke. But he was gone. And so I just feel real compelled to him, by him to just say his last joke, if looks could kill. So thank you.
And please, your name.
Hello, I'm Xavier, and I'm Tony's grandson. And hi, Grandma. I just want to say my life hasn't been super easy, but something that God has blessed me with was the ability to glean things from people. And I just want to thank you, Grandma and Grandpa, for me being able to glean how I treat my wife, because I've seen how Tony loved you throughout all of the years, and that's something that I want to emulate until the end, just like him. So something that I also want to thank is, through his work and, his work with the Lord, something that my dad placed on his heart in action. I always tell them this, I tell my mom and dad this, I wouldn't do the same thing for me and my brother and my sister, who at 15 years old accepted this little African-American child that he didn't know from Adam into his house. I just came over and showered one day, and that was it. They were my parents from then on out. And then going along with how my grandfather was, I remember this had to be very early on. And started there in 2000, living there in 2009, and so this had to be maybe 2010. We didn't live in the greatest of areas, and my granddad would just get up and go on walks in the morning, right? And one day he's walking down just a random sketchy alley. I personally didn't want to walk down this alley at any point in time, but we happen to live next to this alley, and he's speaking I don't know how he's communicating with these people that, going along with what people said earlier, spoke almost no English, but would have very long conversations with them anytime he would come down for the rest of the time. And anytime I would pass, they would wave to me and ask how my grandfather was until we moved away. And that was it. That's the end of this.
Thank you, sir. Someone else?
I want to thank Tony for being my husband's friend. My husband has very few friends, and Tony is someone that Jerry really took to. And one of my fondest memories of them is we would often spend Sunday afternoons in their apartment. They opened their home to us, and we would watch something on television like Longmire, or the episodes. And, Roxanne and I would be, talking or doing something. And then sometimes, I don't know if you saw the picture, but sometimes one time Tony and Jerry one of them had a funny hat. I think both of them, maybe both of them. And they were banging on the table. And, it was so loud, banging and doing the Indian chants. And it was absolutely hysterical. And I remember when he first came, I invited him to the East Haven Public Library, and I don't know why, but I was surprised that he came. It was an event for my husband's birthday. I usually take him place, and it was a man speaking on a book that he had written on the Christmas Carol. He would also mention sometimes a post-apocalyptic fiction book called Lucifer's Hammer. and say that in order to be in that community in the book, you had to have a skill. And my husband and I would look at each other and realize that we wouldn't be in that community because we were librarians. But the most beautiful memory I have is the card that he gave to my husband, and it had said, "May your life be filled with unexpected joys."
Thank you for it. Not everyone at once, please. Name, rank, and serial.
Got it. I'm Beth Anderson Welty, and I've known Tony for over 20 years. We were introduced by Jim Solomon. Actually, Roxanne and I were introduced. He thought it would be a great idea if we conspired to run a grief group together, and Tony was part of that. And through my friendship with Roxanne, I got to know him better, and he became my chiropractor. I didn't know I needed a chiropractor. Tony told me I needed a chiropractor. And so, and he practiced. Their office was so funny. It was in their house, which had this tiny little driveway that you took your life in your hand back and out of. And I'll never forget the first time Anthony adjusted me. It was the first time I could actually look over my shoulder to back out of their driveway, and I didn't know that was a thing. I thought I had a lot of blind spots in my car. I didn't realize it was my neck. But Tony and I had this sweet relationship. He was so kind to me. I was a widow, and he would look after me. He was always discounting his services for me because of our friendship. And I'll never forget, there were times that I remember pulling in with my van, and he came out. He was heading out afterwards. He said, "Beth, you know, your van is leaking something." And I didn't know what it was. And so he told me, he looked in my car for me. He said it was transition fluid. And every time I went to visit him, he'd follow me out to the car after and check my training fluid. And I'll never forget, one time I was at the Kmart Plaza, and he was there to get some fishing stuff, and he saw my van, and he came over. I didn't see him. He saw me, came over with a paper towel. He's like, "I just want to check that fluid for you." And in the trunk of his car was a jug of transmission fluid to pour in until I could afford to get that fixed. And he was just a great guy, and that's what he did. And I love hearing about his jokes. He told a lot of jokes. My kids used to call him Mr. Amazing Facts because there's not anything he didn't know. And anyway, I remember when Roxanne had pancreatic cancer and was recovering, and I went to go visit her, and seeing you were there, and we walked into the room, and we were trying to make conversation, and it was so hard to see Roxanne. And anyway, I had my son with me, who thought this would be the great time to tell everybody that Mom was going on a date. And so he kind of dropped that out at midair, and that my mom's got a first date tomorrow. And so Roxanne and Anthony were my biggest cheerleaders, and they came to my wedding, and they had it was so special to have them there. And this is my husband, yes. And so those are my Tony stories. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Your front row, you can take that.
Perfect. Just what I wanted, I guess. Hi, I'm Samantha. I am one of Grandpa's grandchildren. And some of my favorite memories about Grandpa are centered around holidays. All of us cousins, as you can tell, there's a lot of us, and we'd all go to Grandma and Grandpa's house, and boy, were we a riot. We would have the most intense Easter egg hunts, and Grandma and Grandpa thought it'd be fun to load up the little eggs with coins and just watch us all fight over them. And I will never forget Tyler throwing me in a pricker bush just so he could get the egg with $1 in it. Yeah, well, I saw it first. And Grandma and Grandpa, really, they found entertainment in this. And I mean, boy, it is good memories, though. Also, more sentimental ones, such as Christmas. My mom would type up these letters from Santa with a Christmas border on them and say, you know, you've done a good girl, you know, I'll hear from you soon, send me your wish list. And all of a sudden the phone would ring and you would just hear, well, I was little, I didn't know then, but it would be Grandpa going, ho, 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 Merry Christmas. Have you been a good girl? I don't know. And of course, if I could be so lucky, he'd say, Mrs. Claus wants to talk to you. And Grandma would get on and be like, oh, can you leave me extra cookies? So thank you, Grandma, and thank you, Grandpa, for always just loving us and going the extra mile, because the extra mile doesn't have to be costly or laborious. It can just be love, and you guys did that for us.
Get to hold it? No. Well, that's not fair. I knew Roxanne and Tony here through church, and I didn't get to know him nearly as much as I did Roxanne. She was my secret sister 1 year, and it was such a blessing. But 3 years ago, when I was pregnant with my third, he would always joke towards the end of my pregnancy. He'd be like, is that baby not coming yet? That baby not coming? And he'd always, have his hands out like he was ready to catch in case I was going to give birth at church here. But he was just always a real joy. And then, I don't know if it was that Christmas or the following, but they had picked out a scarf and blessed me with it. And it was just such a sweet blessing. And Roxanne told me that he picked it out just for me because he thought that color would look great on me. And it was just such a blessing having them here and their smiles and their kindness. And he just really emanated such kindness and compassion. So I just appreciate that.
This is me, Steven. You might remember me from church. And here's the story I want to tell you. I don't remember what they look like, but I remember what they look like now. Well, one day, I was with Mr. Tony, and he asked me to sneak some cookies. And I snuck them for him, and he ate them.
I guess there's confession in church, huh? You're a granddaughter. I'm sorry, sir. Grandside eyes.
Obviously, I didn't inherit the tall genes. We don't talk about that. I should have worn my heels. Anyways, I just wanted to thank Grandpa and Grandma for making me fall in love with my first love, which was art. I remember sitting in like this exercise room, and instead of working out, we were sitting down with a piece of paper, drawing numbers and making faces from them. And he taught me almost everything I know, the basics, and every time I saw him, he would either give me an art book or a new sketchbook or pencils. He would give me the tips and the tricks, and every time I do an art piece or anything like that, I just think of him. And it's so special to me because, everyone has all these funny stories, and I have plenty of those, but he was so sweet and kind, and he cared about my interest, and he shared the things he loved, and I'm just so grateful because I don't know where I would be without my art, and having that, and that saved me in some form of ways, so I'm very grateful for that. And of course, Grandma and her knitting, thanks for that. Yes, we're sisters like that. But yeah, I'm very grateful for him, but yeah.
My name is Liz. I've known Roxanne and Tony for the last 2 years. Once COVID hit, there was an email that went out, and they're like, hey, can someone bring meals over? And so I did, and I just never stopped. So I've been visiting Roxanne and Tony every Sunday for the last 2 years, and I always bring my daughter along with me. And Tony just always made a point of playing with her all the time, taught her how to play backgammon. There's a backgammon board on the table in the house. And so he's like, all right, what's this number and this number? And she was learning math. I mean, she was getting an education at the house. And then he would say, hey, Google, play children's music. And then my daughter would be, hey, Google, play this song. Google, play that song. And he always loved a good meatloaf. It was like every 3 weeks I probably will make meatloaf with extra gravy and mashed potatoes. She can't live without mashed potatoes with extra butter. And then I would also just kind of, yes, and I would also, help out around the house if I could. And always before I left, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to take out the garbage before I go. I'll see you guys next week. I'll bring this next week. And he goes, Liz, it's not garbage. It's garbage. And I was like, okay, sorry, Tony. I'll remember that. So I just am so blessed to know Tony and to spend so much time with both of them. And they've just been like, adoptive grandparents for me and for my daughter as well. She loves you so much, and she loves her, that she would call them Miss Roxanne and her dear Mr. Tony.
Going once. Again?
By age, the youngest two would go first for a certain amount of time, and then the next two, because of course I never was pregnant without one of my sisters for all three of my kids, and so we always had close in age kids. So you did have your time, and you wasted it. I didn't know I was going to say that till I said it. Sorry. I just wanted to make it clear that it wasn't like the 1-year-old and the 12-year-old running at the same time.
No, we were both 5. I still had to.
That part is true. Okay.
All right, we got time for one more.
I'm good. Don't worry. Oh no, I'm not gonna throw you underneath the bus. Don't worry. I'm not you, so I'm not gonna sit here and talk bad about you. But I am. Hi, my name's Tyler. I'm Tony's grandson, and I don't have any big stories to share or anything like that. It just he influenced my life in so many ways. Like cooking is one of my biggest passions, and I'm gonna be honest. Favorite meat, cow tongue, by far. You can fight me. Cow tongue's the best. All thanks to Tony. He was always eating something I never heard of. And it's like, what are you eating? Oh, pickled herring with peanut butter and some chocolate sauce on the side. It's delicious. And you're just like, oh, I'll try it. And you regret it so much. But yeah, and he also always shared so many facts with me. Like, I love animals, and I've been studying about animals my whole life, and he would always share facts about animals or tell me jokes that were very inappropriate for my age, so I could tell him at school and get detention. So, he really is an inspiration to me because I'm just like him. I like to have fun, and I'll always be a child at heart no matter how old I get. I'll still be making jokes and throwing things at my little sister to make her mad at me. So, Yeah, he really just influenced my whole life and gave me my love of learning and my love for really weird food. And he gave me the habit of whenever I cook a chicken, I just rip the butt off. That little chicken butt part. The tuchus. Yes, the tuchus. Yeah, I stole that habit from him, but he changed my life so much, and I'm gonna miss him so much. And love you, Grandma.
Well, I'm Andrea, one of Tony's daughters. I just wanted to say one thing that represented how involved he was in his kids' lives. And obviously so many others. One time I was taking a Western Civ night college course, and my dad was talking my ear off about my class. And I said, "How do you know all this?" He goes, "Oh, well, I signed up at the community college. I'm taking the same course you are." So that's how much he instilled learning and loved it and was involved in everybody's interest.
All right, one more in the back.
I don't need. I'm Susan Skripik. I am a former patient of Roxanne's. I just want to say thank you for the honor and the privilege to being in a room filled with love and laughter and knowing how a life well lived is done. Thank you.
At this point, we'd like to have a special presentation to Roxanne. And the cousins argued. That's a first for me. That was awesome. See, all right, I'm gonna have to separate you guys. In the Bible, there's this story about how God starts to create stuff. And it starts out in the beginning, go figure. And God's setting to create, and he's creating trees and shrubberies and oceans and stars and moons and all kinds of stuff. And then he gets to people. And it's that the birds in Genesis. Then God formed the man and woman. Hey, Mike, can you do that? All right. Do I need this at all? Can you hear me? All right. So it says, then the Lord God formed the man of dust. putting your faith as your Savior is that only way we given up our sins to be right with God because of our sins by our faith that Jesus paid the price for our sins on the cross. Now, we, anyone else who has faith, Lord, Savior, we are not ourselves. So if you're taking the tire on there's one that's a good way to say. That morning, as you drive, it is awesome. It is a couple of minutes here. There's art somewhere there. They came home. They came home after this beautiful morning out.
We're going to close. Yeah. This is Tony's favorite joke. PG.
I'd be remiss. His favorite joke is, why do men die first? Because they want to.
That joke would only work by the widow.
I just want to share that I chose this